What up, y'all? So I'm very excited to bring y'all this one quick intro. This is a conversation with Stephen Roberts that basically started with a text message. I hit him up and I said, "Yo, you want to talk about the future of culture and the future of Black culture?" And he said, "Yeah." And this is what started. I do need to give a little bit of a caveat, though. There's a point in this conversation, and this caveat is for those of y'all who are journalists or are considering becoming a journalist or at an early stage in your career. There are a few things in here that might sound like career advice, and I want to caution you, don't listen to half of this and then think that you got an idea what to do with your life and then run on and do that. You will hear the caveats at the end where we discuss about how some of the stuff that we talk about might not work for everybody, so keep that part in mind. But anyway, no more intro. Let's get right into it. Stephen Roberts. Hope y'all dig this one. I haven't seen you in person in a minute.
Word, it's been a minute. I think the last time I was in LA was 2022. Yeah,
I guess so.
that's probably the last time I saw you. Me, you,
Yeah,
and Ellis
man.
got brunch at Great White. Look at this
That
memory.
is right. Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
forgot about that. Yeah, we were by the ice cream spot and they had the Sailor Moon car.
Mhm.
You saw the Sailor Moon car, right? Were you
I
there?
don't
I
think
think
so.
you left. You
Nah.
left. There was
Okay.
somebody.
All right.
Somebody had totally done out like a Ford Focus and just straight up all Sailor Moon. Not even just Sailor Moon. Like
Uh-huh.
Sailor Moon in Japanese. They just
Oh wow.
totally
Okay.
kitted it out. And so of course I went over, took a picture, posted it to the gram, and people legit thought it was my car. Like
I can see that. Yeah.
no.
Yeah. I mean, I can
That's
see it.
not
Yeah.
that's not a thing I would do. First off,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a Ford Focus. That's the main thing, is I wouldn't have a Ford
Fair. Okay.
Focus.
Fair.
That's
Fair.
the main problem, is people think I bought a Ford Focus. But also that, look, I respect Sailor Moon. I
Mm-hmm.
don't ride that hard for Sailor Moon. If anything, people know it would be Dragon Ball Z, and Piccolo would definitely be on the hood. Happy
This is
Black
true.
History Month.
Happy
Happy
Black
Black
History Month.
History Month.
Yeah. And shout
Um,
out to our Mexican homies who love Goku.
Yo, for real, that's a whole other topic,
Yeah.
man. That's going to the documentary. I'm not even playing. I'm still working
There
on
we
it,
go.
low key, in the
Beautiful.
background,
Hey, keep it working.
But look, everyone, for those of you all who are unfamiliar with Steven, I'm not really sure what to say, and I also can't really do a great introduction for you because you've just done too many things. um What I will say is my introduction to Steven was working at Vice. We were fellow travelers at one point. We were in the same boat at one point, and we
Mm-hmm.
actually only got to work on one piece. We flew into Chicago, and
Is that
let
the only piece?
I think that's the only piece we worked on.
That's crazy.
It's wild, isn't
Okay,
it?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we went to Chicago to work on a piece about basically the cops putting leaving trucks open with boxes of shoes and waiting
Mm-hmm.
for somebody to go take them, and called bait trucks essentially. And yeah, we were in there. We were in Chicago for, no joke, an afternoon. We left, and it was a really interesting experience, but
Yeah.
I came to find out that Steven had been working on all sorts of other stuff. So not only you were at Vice and then MTV and then
So
Vice again. Yeah, give me the background, man.
yeah, I can give you like the full like origin story. I actually started
Yes.
out at MTV News. My professors and I went to Stony Brook University out in Long Island, and my professors in journalism school were like, "Hey, please go work at Rolling Stone or something like that because you only care about sex, drugs, and rock and roll." Like those were always like the papers I would hand in. I'd be
Mm,
covering drugs on campus. I would go to shows. I would like just cover sports events, and they were like, "Yeah, you're not going to be able to do a PTA meeting." So followed their wise wisdom, and they were like, "Yeah, go work at a Rolling Stone." However, I did want to learn production because I knew journalism was dying. So it's been like 20 years of dying, probably a bit more than that. But I wanted to learn video production because I knew that would open up a lot of doors for me. And thankfully, I had a cousin who was interning at MTV News, and he slid my resume. Shout out to nepotism
here we go.
to Miss one Christina Garibaldi. Shout out Christina, and she loved me. So I started out there. Was there for 5, 6 years. Then
Mm,
went over to Vice as they were launching Noisy and kind of becoming Vice, and went there, but that just wasn't a great fit for a number of reasons. I think mainly because the people who hired me got like fired or left like 3 weeks after I got there. Went back to MTV News, worked there for 12 more months, and then got poached again to go up to ESPN. Worked at ESPN for roughly 2 years, but I'm from Brooklyn, and Bristol, Connecticut is not very much like Brooklyn. Bounced around freelance for a bit at the Fader, worked for the Clinton campaign, and then ended back up at MTV working on like documentaries. And then I had an opportunity to kind of go oversee video for MTV News, which I ran with. Let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb because somebody's calling. And then that was a beautiful experience. Got to lead a whole team. We did a lot of really dope things, really loved it. Unfortunately, corporate America and Viacom, Paramount, whatever it is now, is going to do what it does. Dipped, and then that's when I came over to Vice to meet you. So this is 2018. Yep.
Damn, dude. And then since then,
I've done a lot of other shit. I've kind of always been the type that, I want to try this, and I go after it. That's very much me. I never saw myself as someone who would sit in a position, and there's nothing wrong with that, but like sit in a position for 30 years and then what I would do. That's just kind of not my personality or what I was ever really interested in. So I dipped from Vice because corporate America, again, going to corporate America. Also very much so that ship was on the way down, and dipped, went over to Wieden Kennedy because wanted to expand my horizons. And I've always wanted to make Nike commercials. And so that's where you go make them. You go make them for Wieden Kennedy. And again, journalism dying. And so after that, that was an interesting, unique experience. Dipped from there, and then
by the way, he was in Portland. You were in Portland when things were jumping off in 2020 in the protests in summer, and so
they weren't jumping off. It was like a 4-block radius where all that was happening.
Precisely, I was about to say that. Yeah.
So it was like one of the things from the outside looking in. It's like, oh, Portland's crazy, yada yada yada. And everyone would be hitting me like, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm at this artisanal coffee shop," because that's all that was around. And but like the craziest thing was actually fucking climate change, like because there were forest fires, and I'm from Brooklyn once again, and there's no forest here, so that was fucking crazy. But protests were chill. They ain't bothered me. And so did that for a number of years. That was a really cool experience. But then have since dipped and currently working on my own thing. Like you mentioned your docs. I have a few I'm working on, like behind the scenes, underground, and like waiting to get that popping because the plan is to build generational wealth and make sure we can build something for all of us to do greatness.
There we go. So that is why I didn't try to do a bio, is because I couldn't have done that.
I've had to practice it, so thank you.
Yeah, man. So look, I hit up Steven a bit ago, like over the weekend, and said, basically just hit him on WhatsApp and said, "Yo, let's talk about culture, the future of culture," which I think necessarily includes the future of Black culture, whatever any of those things mean. And I posted, and I wanted to tie it in because I think it does tie in to this interview that I did with the CEO of TikTok, because I think we can't deny that TikTok, at the very least, is irreversibly changed how we both express ourselves and how we see ourselves. And so, but I think there's a whole lot of other directions we could go to from there. Also, this is just no joke. I thought we have conversations often enough that I feel like are just interesting. And I felt like, you know what, let me, to a degree, right? Maybe not everything, but bring people into some of those, because I feel like that there's something in there, especially with some of the stuff that you're tapped into. So I wanted you to give the full background just to let people know where Steven is coming from, which is to say, think of the kind of the arbiters of cool, the places where cool comes from, the places where, and you can say where culture comes from, right? There's a lot of heavy hitters there. There's a lot of influential outlets there. You don't have to like any of them, right? But Nike, Vice, MTV, I mean, ESPN, sports in general, right? There's a lot of that. And I've participated in some of those, not all of them, obviously, but some of those. So I felt like there was a lot we could start off with. But I don't know, man. Where you want to start? You want to talk about this? You want to
The
start talk
TikTok
about
article?
the TikTok thing? We can start there. Yeah, man. So
Yeah, start there because I know I'm actually super curious to learn a little bit more about it, and I'm sure maybe I'm not quite sure how many people may have read it, but I'm curious, how did that come about for you? And you could give a backstory on what the actual article is too.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, this is a profile on the CEO of TikTok, and I got a couple of emails saying, "Yo, do you want to? Would you like to interview the CEO of TikTok? Like, we really want you to do this." And it was from Y, which I was, of course, obviously very flattered, just that somebody A would think of me and B would think that I would do a good job of it. But I think what they wanted was just, and I this portion of it, I agree with it, is that a lot of the writing about TikTok, or a lot of the reporting about TikTok, has all been about like security, China, and that's all that it is. But that's not what people get on TikTok for. That's not why they get on TikTok. Like, kids don't get on TikTok to leak state secrets. that's not what brought them to TikTok,
yeah.
right? It's like, hey, yo, yeah, let's get here and let me see how much of a security violation for my great country can I be. Like, that's not why children are using this application, is because it's interesting to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Shout out to Ellis, by the way. Shout out to Neto. We made a piece on it in early 2020, just before the pandemic. And so I'd been thinking about the cultural ramifications of it. So anyway, yeah, that was how it happened. It was just, hey, let's get a cultural angle on this rather than just tech or, security or whatever, politics.
That's interesting. I'm curious, like with that, you also had a chance to sit with the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like your prep, was there anything that kind of jumped out to you that you may have wanted to ask in terms of the space of music and looking at why kids are using it?
Yeah, I mean, and so, like I said, I posted this in the chat, and most of this is, I mean, there's a big long kind of profile of my impressions of talking to him and stuff like that, and also of the xenophobia I think that it comes with our United States treatment of the topic, because it's a Chinese-based app, and all of a sudden, all the xenophobia and stuff like that comes out. Look, I get the security concerns, cool, understand. Also xenophobia, but yeah, I mean, what I wanted to see how they actually saw themselves fitting into culture, because I mean, there's a TikTok that I reference in the piece, and I actually showed him the TikTok, where there's somebody saying, it's a musician, and she's saying basically that a lot of musicians hate having to promote themselves on TikTok, that it's embarrassing, that it's demeaning, that it just feels like they're just quote unquote content, right? They're not actually people. They're not actually there. They want to make art, and they're having to just feed this machine, and they don't want to do that. And hey, CEO of this large media platform, what do you think about the fact that there are artists who hate that they have to play this game? Because a lot of people who don't. There's people who are good at it, but there's people who really hate it. So I was curious about what he thought of that. And he mostly disagreed. Like, I don't know if he hadn't seen that sort of criticism before, but his stance was that, well, TikTok is lowering the barriers of entry for musicians to be seen. And so thus it's a net positive. And I think it's somewhere he said, he used the word, let me see. Net positive. Yeah. He said, yeah, we're bringing a net positive. And he said that, so that was the one thing. And the other thing he said was, yo, well, people want an authentic experience. People don't just want music. They want to be able to authentically connect with their fans, or fans want to authentically connect with the artists. But what if the artist doesn't want to show you their daily routine and, hey, get ready with me to, I don't know, man, like polish the keys on the piano? What if you don't want to do that?
Yeah.
What if you just want to make music? And, her argument was like, do you think Tom York from Radiohead would have been saying, "Hey, let's make the song of the. I'm gonna make the song of the summer." Like, no. So, yeah.
That's interesting because it's funny. I maybe almost slightly agree with him from this
Mm,
perspective. You use Tom York.
yeah.
I don't. Well, it's on a few levels there. Like I'm not necessarily going to TikTok to look for Radiohead
Mm,
or like Tom York's individual stuff, or I forget the other offshoot group. But the Smile, I'm not necessarily going to TikTok for that. But in terms of if Tom York wanted to do that, he's probably the worst person to use in this example. But
yes.
he could, and so he does have the choice to be like, "Nah, I don't want to do this, and my fans aren't looking for me this from me." However, if you're like, let's say a Doja Cat, who's probably also another interesting example,
Mm-hmm.
her fan base is a bit younger and probably native to the platform in
Yes.
terms of which she may need to do it. It's not like her, obviously her relationship with her label is her relationship with her label, but it may behoove her to kind of connect with the audience in that way. At the same time, Doja Cat doesn't seem too keen on connecting with her audience. And like maybe
Right.
rightfully so. So I think it's kind of this weird thing of I think it's a tool, if this makes sense, where you can kind of use a
Yes.
tool however you want to use it, and you
Mm.
can take advantage of it, or you can be like, "Nah, I'm good."
I think I think that's where I'm seeing musicians kind of split here, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, none of this was really to dunk on the dude because
Yeah,
mostly I just wanted to hear what he had to say, right? And I think the 2 points he's making, there's merit to them. I can see arguments for and against, right? And that's why I was bringing up, I think that there's a danger sort of in saying, oh well, it used to be good in the old days, right? I mean, there's this paragraph where I'm trying to bring this up in the piece where
mm-hmm.
the perception is, and that's why I say the perception is that it used to be if you were musically talented, that's all you needed. That wasn't ever really the case. There were
Yeah,
always other factors. There was luck. There was so many other things, right? And
mm-hmm.
then music videos, you need to be able to be musically talented. You also have to be pretty. And now with TikTok, you have to be talented and pretty and social media savvy. So I think the thing is now that this tool exists, it's like Pandora's box. If you don't use it, there's a problem, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
question would be, could Tom York, could Radiohead break out now? And maybe not. Maybe
Yeah. I think. Oh,
and
sorry.
maybe there were things that we didn't get because they could have been big back in the day and just, the label infrastructure or architecture just didn't let those through. We could have had 10 things that were better than Radiohead. I don't know. I don't know why
Yeah.
I'm using Radiohead just because she did, but yeah.
No, but let's say using the music video example, that's how
Mm,
I learned about Radiohead was MTV.
yeah.
Like I grew up listening to Hot 97. Hot 97 in New York, for those who aren't familiar, was kind of our main and still is hip hop station. And Hot 97 wasn't playing Karma Police. You won't get anything from Kid
Right.
A or anything from there. So I wasn't exposed to it via like terrestrial radio. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I wasn't necessarily going into stores or CD to get cassettes or CDs, really dating myself here. I wasn't looking for those CDs. However, when I saw, I think Karma Police might have been the first video I really remember from them. I saw that late night, as most people who know me, I'm like insomniac. So I saw like Karma Police on MTV. And that's where I
Mm,
was like, oh, what is this? And so I guess to his point, and like maybe just a different way of thinking, like if Radiohead didn't have that, Stephen Roberts from Brooklyn, New York probably wouldn't have known about Radiohead just
right.
because I didn't have music videos. And so a younger Stephen Roberts, who's now what 16, a 16-year-old kid who's on TikTok, they might not know about. Let's use the Smile as an example. They
Mm,
might not know about Tom's new band, but there might be an interesting TikTok that whether it's Tom, a fan of his, does that kind of introduces them to the music. So that's where I can kind of see his point.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think these are definite possibilities because I know people who popped off on TikTok and like musicians,
Mm-hmm.
and they're, I think in general, happy that they popped off. Also on the other side, they feel like, man, I got to keep doing this one thing. Like I can't branch out. That's always kind of existed though. I think it's just hyper focused.
Yeah, I think it's, it's funny. I think my love of Pink Panthers. I found out about her on TikTok,
That's what
and
TikTok. Yeah, that's where she
yeah,
did her thing. Yeah.
and like she was a kid in her bedroom making music,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good, and it was using like old drum and bass samples, old jungle beats,
Mm-hmm.
things that caught my ear, but were then being presented in like a new way and through like a new lens. So that's where I think like we're almost reverse engineered by using Radiohead, but if we use like an example of, let's say, Pink Pantheress Olivia Rodrigo, even though she might have had some label support in doing so, like those are kind of what is, and we're gonna get into it, but like kind of what culture is. Culture is young people. So
Mm.
like I think in kind of from that perspective, yeah, like these are kids who are natively. It's not a second thought that they're using TikTok. It's how
Yeah.
they communicate their worlds and lives. So if you are an artist, if you want to communicate your art, you're going to use TikTok if you're a 16-year-old kid, just because that's what you're used to doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the platform. It's the platform, which I think there's
Yeah.
a lot more to say about that. I think that, well, one question that I didn't get into
Yeah.
with the CEO, which I'm not sure if I would have had a very satisfying answer to it, but one difference I think that is sort of a pretty fundamental difference between what we're doing now, and what we were doing in the past is, and also between TikTok and every other social media platform before it, is numbers. TikTok at basically every stage of the way is always talking to you, it's communicating to you that numbers are important. So if you think about what Facebook's sort of reasons for existence was, like, why do you use TikTok, or why do you use Facebook? Oh, connect with my college friends. At first it was college, and then okay,
Mm-hmm.
connect with friends. MySpace, a place for friends, right? Kind of similar, where MySpace
Yeah.
was kind of broad, Facebook was college only. Is like, oh well, Facebook is MySpace but for smart kids. And then what? Twitter is just mini blog essentially. Instagram posts pretty pictures of your food at first, then post selfies, right? TikTok is, I mean, it's got slogans, but the things that it pushes to you is, I don't know if you use TikTok a ton, but pretty often it'll tell you, hey, here's how you can go viral.
Mm.
Whereas app platforms never really used to do that. I think they're starting to. Like YouTube is starting to tell you, hey, here's how you can optimize your growth or whatever. But TikTok is interesting in that, pretty built in, it tells you, here's how you can be more successful at this game.
Mm-hmm.
I find that really interesting because I think back to, shoot, when I was a teenager and I was making music, I had no illusions of, even if I thought, yo, I'm gonna go win a Grammy. Let's say I was a Tyler the Creator type, right?
Yeah.
I was more concerned with, I'm just gonna make stuff and I'm gonna give it to my friends, and that's the first step. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not gonna, like, I can trust that they're gonna sit down, hopefully, and listen to my whole song. I don't gotta catch their attention the first 2 seconds. I don't have to
Yeah.
structure the things that I make to grab you so that you don't do something else immediately. TikTok, I feel like, it is fundamentally changing how we make stuff because of the focus on numbers, I think.
Yeah. No, I think that's a super valid point. I think it's also keeping you on the app by doing
Mm-hmm.
that, by like
Of
kind of
course.
coaching you how to use it, and
Yeah.
then and so in doing so, it's coaching you to stay there, and like you're staying there, you're engaging with it more. So I think it's kind of, we have to always remember all these apps, their plan is to get as many people on the app so they can start selling advertisement against it. Like I think that's something that we always kind of have to call out, where like if you're a kid, that might not be your first thought, but
Yeah.
we're thankful enough to be adults where we can be like, okay, well, this is a game in which these platforms, because you brought up MySpace. I think MySpace was kind of this funny experiment where eventually ads and things came, but
Mm.
it was just kind of building community and like you
Yeah.
having this platform and your page to kind of express who you are, like who your top friends are, what song is going to play on your page.
Right.
And it was kind of like beta social media for us. It was kind of like that beginning. And then obviously that evolves with Facebook. And we've all seen the movie, and we've all been, well, you and I were in college at that time. It was
Mm.
mainly to look at girls around campus and like, as like what you call it, as like simple and like barbaric as that may seem, like that's what it was. And so at the same time, that's
Damn,
how it
you had a
kept it.
plan, man. I wasn't even thinking that far ahead, but okay, all
I
right,
mean,
I got
homie
you.
said it in the movie, like they
Yeah,
were
yes,
literally
yes,
trying to
yes. Yeah,
yeah,
no, that's how it
with the
started.
Noah.
Exactly.
You
Yes.
were also like a horny teenager, and so, and it's vice versa. It goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it was this idea of doing that, and then from there, kind of capturing an audience. So then that way you build on a platform, and then you can start selling ads. So
Right.
I think that's something where TikTok has, now that it might be the fourth generation of this, thinking about
Mm.
Twitter, Instagram, it kind of has those lessons that I can learn from those previous apps.
Yeah.
And there's also like really, you pointed out in the article, but there's this really dope thing where TikTok actually shows you how to edit and to make
Yes,
content in the platform where you don't
dude.
have to leave. You can do
Yeah.
it all native to it. And I think that's like another lesson and learn that kind of captures the audience and keeps them there.
That is one thing, honestly. And I actually told, you know, look, I was I was a little hard on them. Not hard on them, but I didn't come in to do some softball stuff. I wasn't going in again to
Yeah.
dunk or try to catch them, but I did some things, and you can see in the piece that their comms person wasn't excited about all these questions. Like their comms
Mm-hmm.
person was sitting there the whole time and interrupted him actually to disagree with some things. Um, Whatever. That is what comms people do. That's
Yep.
fine. I'm not mad at it. I understand the game. Um, but one of the things that you cannot deny is that for all of the whole thing that Meta likes to say, that oh man, we're making a metaverse, whatever, whatever. It's not even a competition, man. It's not even a competition. Like you do not have to leave TikTok and all the stuff that what is it? The Elon Musk is saying, oh, X is going to be the everything app. Basically, he's trying to make a WeChat. If you're not familiar with WeChat, WeChat is a
Mm-hmm.
WECHAT. Weixin is a it's it's an app that basically allows you to do almost everything. You can talk to your friends. You can call and video call your friends. You can buy food. You can pay for food. Like you can do almost anything within this app. You order a car, whatever you want. Read the news, anything and everything almost. And for all that dude is the Elon Musk is saying he wants to make something like that, TikTok is so very close to that. Where
Yeah.
yeah, there's the app, the editing app, not only within TikTok, but CapCut. CapCut, if I was teaching a media class right now or like an intro to media class, I would have them use CapCut. I would not teach them Final Cut Pro. I would not teach them DaVinci Resolve. I would not teach them Premiere. I would start people off on CapCut because it does 95% of everything you need, and you can do everything in house. It's all, like you never have to leave. It's incredible.
Yep.
It's you have to give credit where credit's due. It's incredibly good. It's incredibly integrated. It all works, and for so many, especially kids, I think you and I we're in an interesting generation where I think us and people like in their 20s, basically 20s upwards and just under like 45 or so, we're in this generational kind of area where we had to get good at computers because computers weren't very good, and our
Yeah.
our parents never had to get computers good at computers because they can get away with it at their job.
Mm-hmm.
But kids, they it doesn't occur to them to Google things.
Yeah, which
Like you
is
you just oh,
interesting. Yep.
yeah, it's wild. You just open up TikTok and
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't occur to them that oh hey I want to know something. Okay, I'm gonna look at TikTok and it'll come up eventually. It's just like go up to the fire hose where we
Yeah.
had to like look for stuff. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
well. I do think looking this the skill of looking for stuff is probably a good thing to have, but that's just what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because everything's there.
It's also like, and we may get into this later. I still think it's, in addition to like kind of social media platforms, it's like a
Mm.
cultural thing
Mhm.
where you're not taught to like be a critical thinker or to look a step further.
Yeah.
Like you are essentially probably for a generation have been taught to pass a test You haven't been
Yeah.
taught to necessarily learn or seek information. So these platforms are only kind of maybe taking advantage of that. And so if you kind of have a generation that, I don't want to say that it's not that they're not media literate, but it's the way that they attack problems is just different because the
Mhm.
problems that they face are not simplistic, but different. And so I think that combines and they kind of feed each other. It's like a snake eating its tail, where it's just like, no, this is how we pass a test. This is how we receive information. So there's never really a need to like look beyond or question things. And so I think you kind of have that happening because new information is always introduced to you, which can shatter your worldview. And then you're like, hey, and it's not to say that our generation or our parents' generation don't face that same thing, but I
Yeah,
also think it's a
definitely.
combination of like our education system and then just kind of social media where it's just like two almost things butting heads.
All right. So we've laid the bases. I think we have a good foundation in talking about
Yeah,
social media. Where is culture right now?
that's a very interesting question.
Or we could say culture
Just it,
consumption, however you want to put that.
I think it's in a place of gluttony
Ooh, okay.
because I think you have access to so much where you are kind of it's being fed and like shoved to you that you need to look like this, you need to have this. Um, Here's new music. You don't really ever get to sit and grow with that artist. You don't get to watch them evolve because next week there's a new artist you need to be up on. So I think because we have like such access to everything,
Mm.
it's a bit of an overload and we're just kind of consuming things. So I think that culture is in an interesting place where that's happening, but I do see kind of a slow rejection of that, or it's maybe like an active rejection that's
Mm.
happening, but we're watching it slowly happen where it's this thing where, well, I'm not being fulfilled by this because I don't have any like real brand loyalty to the thing now. There's a great article that came out, I believe, yesterday from like Business of Fashion about this idea of where Nike went wrong or where Nike has gone of course. But
Mm.
there's a number of reasons why. But one of the things it kind of points to is this kind of idea of just, well, let's push the sale of like kind of retro sneakers that people will always
Mm.
buy and buy and buy. At the same time, like a new generation of Nike users and like reliance on performance wear has kind of fallen to the wayside. And
Yes.
also building new stories to those older products for a generation who may not have seen Michael Jordan play kind of doesn't necessarily help. And then building new relationship with new basketball players because basketball is kind of a part of like the cultural zeitgeist for Nike. While Nike is a running at the core like a running shoe
At
and
the
running
beginning,
shoe
yeah.
company, basketball is kind of what helped it cross over, which we'll kind of get into a bit more about just kind of black people being involved in culture. But you kind of look at things like that where people are quickly feeling, well, I don't identify with this. There's nothing that I identify and can latch onto other than I need to have this, I need to wear this. And the same goes for, I think, with fashion. I think you're
Mm.
slowly starting to see people try to figure out their identity. It's something that I've noticed going out in New York, which kind of saddens me because New York was always known for fashion. But
Uh,
now people seem to dress like someone that they saw on TikTok. You can tell like the TikTok and follow. But what I think kind of naturally always happens is a pushback against that, where
yeah.
people are like, "Oh no, this is corny." Particularly the city I'm from, and I understand like New York is a melting pot of a lot of different thoughts
Yeah.
and cosmopolitan interests. But I think that's something that I've noticed where you do see people dressed like TikTok influencers, and it's like, nah, like New York is all about who you are. And so I think you're going to
Mm.
slowly start seeing kind of a pushback against this idea of like, oh, this is what it is because you're being fed this. Like, oh, the numbers are saying like this dude looks, he has a lot of
Yeah.
followers, he dresses, so maybe I should dress like that. And then with music kind of just being pushed your way. I know we'll talk
Mm.
about the Grammys a bit later, but oftentimes like it's numbers, numbers, numbers. But
Yeah.
the story or why you might relate to an artist is kind of needed for a lot of people. Like they need
Mm.
to have a to an artist. And oh, perfect example. If you look at probably the biggest song that came out of there was a song that's our age, Fast Car, Tracy
Man.
Chapman.
Okay, yes, 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 yes.
Not Tracy Chapman, Fast Car.
Mhm.
She Luke Combs over the last year does a cover of Fast Car, and it blows up. He's
Yes,
a big
right.
fan of Tracy Chapman, kind of wants to share that moment with her, and is always like giving her kudos to her. On
Hmm.
the surface, this is a gay black woman and a straight younger white dude, but they on the Grammy stage singing the same exact sing her song, and it's never like a moment where it misses a beat because it's talking about actual real shit. It's talking about the fact that all we really have is a fast car and society is like crumbling around us, and that's a story that resonates with a black queer woman,
Mm.
a straight white dude, and most of like America who is working class or maybe even like working class or middle class who are like
Mm.
struggling. And so that's something that shows a universality. However, that's kind of like a nice moment, and the things that happen later on in the show are kind of like, well, these are the big songs and moments of the year. But at the same time, the thing that people still resonate, and you'll see on all your social media feed, is that
Mm.
song and like this rediscovery of like this truly simple, straight to the point song.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioning that people dressing like TikTok. So here's something
Mm-hmm.
that I've thought really interesting because so you were in New York. So I obviously had a different perspective. I had a different upbringing because I was in San Bernardino, which is
Yeah.
this weird mix of hood and suburb. It's like country, hood,
Mm-hmm.
and suburb. We have all three in there. We have everything but cosmopolitan. We did it like before my time because
Mm-hmm.
it was the end of Route 66, and so all the big, especially all the big black comedians used to come through there. Um, like it was the end of the road. It was right before you get to L.A., and so everybody
Yeah.
made a stop there. No longer the case. um, I'm very happy to be from there. I would not recommend that anybody go there. Right? It's not a destination unless you're from there, and I'm fully okay with that because I love it. But again, not some place I would tell somebody to go. But growing up there, we had a version that I think in that way I think we're actually pretty representative of a lot of the rest of, I'll just say, the United States,
Mm-hmm.
in that the stereotypes of the, oh, there's jocks, oh, there's the jocks, there's the there's the goths, there's the whatever. We didn't really quite have that so much, partially because of the ethnic makeup of our place. But there was definitely the, oh, you listen to this, you're over here, you listen to this, you're over there. It was that did exist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And nobody listened to country. If you listen to country, there was something genuinely wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Genuine, like you were really really weird, or your parents were weird if you did, but the lines were pretty clear. Now, but there was only so many places you could get your music from. Basically MTV and BET. And if you didn't
Yeah.
listen to those two, you were out of the cool zone. Totally. You had no hope. TikTok, and so of course you dress like those people.
Mm-hmm.
TikTok allows for way more niches. And so you can be just totally locked in with somebody that none of your friends have heard of, and you can pull up to school wearing some real weird stuff or with your clothes cut up all funny, and they'll at least know, okay, you've probably found something that maybe I don't like, but you're really into it, and I bet there's some kind of weird community that's really into that. That straight up didn't exist. If you pulled up, at least where I went to high school, if you pulled up
Mm-hmm.
looking weird, you just looked weird. That was it. There was no
Yeah.
reason. You know what I mean?
It's similar and then kind of different because again, New York's a bit of a melting pot.
Yes, yes. New York is
And
different.
so it's like, and that also skews my view of things
Mm,
because um outside of like being like in a fashion capital, I grew up with a gay uncle who would always be like, nah, the way you're dressing is terrible. So
yeah.
that made me kind of pay attention to how I dressed and presented myself in fashion.
Mm,
And there's like little things that I now think about and like how I dress and present myself were like hammered into me when I was like 8 to
mm,
11 by like my uncle. And so those kind of shape things. However, I feel like when you're a teenager, it's like that one time where you can kind of experiment. You're not ever truly experimenting because you're trying to find your social space,
yes.
but you tend to kind of latch onto something that closely identifies how you feel. At the same time, you might not really know that. So you might be just, all
Yeah.
right, this will keep me safe in a group. Because at the same time, I went to Brooklyn Tech and Fort Greene. Fort Greene didn't look like it did now, but I had to travel across boroughs. So I had to, at the same time, know how to move and be conscious of how I dress, colors
Right.
I wore, and just different things like that. So every experience is a bit different. and everything like that. So I
Yeah.
think that's where, again, my perspective may be a bit skewed, just because I was exposed to so many different. This is black, this white, this Asian, multiple. You're Korean, Japanese, you're Chinese, you're Filipino. So I was exposed to kind of a lot of different cultures and ways of being. And yeah, and I feel like in a funny way, maybe it's all the same, because I feel like we all got our same cues from like the MTVs,
Yeah.
Complex. If you were super cool, maybe it was the Fader or the Face. But
Yeah.
those were still like kind of the things where it helped shape our fashion until we got older and then started experimenting a bit more.
I think actually, in a way, and again, I'm gonna give the credit to TikTok here, just
Mhm.
because of the speed of the algorithm, really, the speed of the
Yeah.
algorithm, the quality of the algorithm. Um, that is allowed for, frankly, for kids, adults also, particularly for kids to have a similar experience to growing up in New York times a million. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
this is true.
there were people, I'm sure you probably knew or had met or something like that, or run across like a black metalhead.
Hmm.
I no, never,
Yeah.
never, ever did I see anything like that. Ever a Latino metalhead? Absolutely not.
Hmm.
They didn't exist. And so I had friends who were into metal, and I would go to their house and they play me stuff, and I didn't know what this stuff was, but I thought it was cool, and I didn't necessarily feel like, oh, I'm not allowed to like that stuff, especially because they were excited I liked it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Dex, come through. Like I'm gonna play you this. Oh yeah, man, double bass this, double kick drum. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. This sounds cool. I like this. Let's go. Yeah, I knew one other black kid who was into punk, and these things didn't exist for me.
Yeah.
But the ability to find, and I'm thinking of this specifically because, I'm seeing similarly kids posting stuff like this on TikTok, like, oh man, there's not a whole lot of Latino kids who like this, but then you see people in the comments who say, oh yeah, I do,
Yeah.
and you can find that stuff. And not only I hesitate to put too much weight on, you gotta find people who look like you in the scene or whatever. It's just that being exposed to the music, period, being exposed to a type of fashion, period, being exposed to a type of
Hmm.
video game, a type of book, a hobby, you find out that you're into plants or whatever. Like TikTok has done this, and I said this in the article, but that doesn't necessarily mean TikTok could collapse tomorrow as a
Yeah.
company. It could totally go bankrupt. Somebody else will come in and they'll eat their lunch. But
Hmm.
those floodgates have been opened for good and for bad. But that is allowing for, a kind of diversification of options of exposure that straight up didn't exist. Except unless you lived in a city like LA or New York. It
This is
just
fair.
wasn't
That's so
possible.
me seeing Outcast, for example. I got
Mm,
into Outcast two ways. My family's from the South on my mom's side, so whenever I would go down south, my cousin Mike will put me on a different every year. Put me
mm.
onto a different Outcast album, and I fell in
Yes.
love with it. But I
Yeah.
used to come back to Brooklyn, and everybody would be like, "Well, what is this country bumpkin shit?" And they would just kind of dismiss it.
The South don't
And
got anything to
so
say. Yeah.
yeah, so I was like, I was very much. I remember being to myself a lot, listening to that on CDs,
Yeah.
and then getting introduced to Cash Money. But then there was also you had Rap City on BT.
Yes.
That's how I learned about Cash Money. A lot more West Coast music. So this is Snoop. This is even the Far Side. So just different things like that. I was exposed to via TV that I couldn't get from Hot 97 terrestrial radio in New York. And then as I'm 14, 15, the internet starts becoming a thing. Maybe this is a bit later when I'm like 17 and going off to college, because then you have LimeWire.
Yep.
So now I can look for and find different music. So now I'm starting to get like a lot of CDs from British acts. So I'm starting to listen to The Clash when I'm in college.
Yeah.
I'm starting to learn about jungle music. I'm starting to learn about just different types of music because now I have access to it from the internet. So like it's weird, but it kind of ladders up to your same point where like as technology evolves, our access to things become more immediate and a bit more global and diverse.
Immediate, global, and diverse, but I think thinner. You know what I mean? Those touch points can become thinner, and I say that because
Yeah.
you have somebody personally introduce you to this stuff to a lot of it in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. Um, you were saying also about with the way that social media works. And this is not to complain about social media. This is just a reality. Is you're kind of bombarded with stuff all the time, and so you don't actually have to seek things. And so, for good and for good and for bad, and that means that your connection to something may be not nearly as deep because
That's fair.
you're not, somebody isn't showing it to you. And I genuinely wonder what it would be like to be, for example, introduced to jungle for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I know how I was introduced to it, right? But
Yeah.
I had to sit with it for a second to get it. Now maybe I would have a similar response if the algorithm just kept saying, "Nah, man, I think you're gonna like this. I think your friends like this. You should give this a try." And then maybe eventually I
Mm-hmm.
would listen, find the one track that I like, and then make friends or what have you. It's just different. I can't say it's
Yeah.
worse. I can't say it's worse. It's just different.
Yeah. It's funny. And even you brought up social media. Like a lot of the things I was detailing in college were
Mm,
kind of outside of social media. So, like,
yeah.
my discovery didn't come from social media. My discovery came from the internet.
Right.
And I know those seem like, so it came from being on Nike Talk forums because I like sneakers, but on Nike Talk, you could also be exposed to music and like the general, they had a music chat actually too. And so you could be exposed to different types of music because people from all over the world like sneakers. And so they're going to have different tastes in music. So then because I'm like starting to form a community of just sneakerheads that I'm finding myself in, now I'm starting to experience like their different types of music, fashion, different things like that. So I'm older, so like my kind of knowledge and know-how wasn't shaped by social media. It was shaped by kind of internet discovery and
Yeah.
New York City.
So let's jump forward a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Um,
Go for it.
we've broached the topic a little bit of coolness, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that coolness, and I people don't understand when I say this, and people think maybe I'm being reductive or silly. Um, the topic of coolness is incredibly important. It is something that's being weaponized. And when I mean weaponized, it's being used as a strategic move. Like look the alt right, the entire alt right movement. That was an attempt to make conservatism cool
Mm-hmm.
because it was seen as something for old, out of touch, out, just not with it white dudes. How can we make it
Yeah.
cool? Um, I think it was successful in some ways. I think it was unsuccessful in some other ways. It even tried to co-opt some music. People are still trying that, right? So I find coolness to be actually, and this is not just in the United States, a lot of the attempt to make political things palatable is not appealing to somebody in a moral sense, but appealing to somebody in a cool sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coolness. This is the cool thing to do. It's not good. It's not what God wants you to do. It's just this is what their stuff. Their side is uncool. Our side is cool. Whatever.
Yeah.
So, um, if we're talking about culture, if we're talking about the cultural production of cool, where does black culture fit in with all of this? Where is black culture right now?
Damn, it's a heavy question, Dex. And kind of following all of that, it's interesting. I never look for cool, if that makes sense. I'm
Mm,
not looking for what's cool. And just in my career and just me as a person, like I'm always just interested in people. And
mm,
so I think one of the side effects of being quiet is that you pay attention and you listen. And
yes.
so I think something that's really helped me in like my career and kind of be up on things that were emerging more so than cool was me paying attention to how people were feeling. So I say all that to say is I'm never looking for what's cool. I'm kind of looking for that counterculture thing. I'm kind of looking for that thing that's pushing back. I'm always looking at kind of what is coming from left field and what is like pushing things forward in that
Yeah.
sense. Like
Mm,
that's where my mind and eye are always at. And so I say that to say I think a lot of black culture and where it is in that space of pushing back against kind of what is like that
mm,
immediacy, that vapidness, and that kind of shallowness. I think it's a lot of that. It's a lot of anger. It's a lot of division that's probably brought on by social media, but already kind of exercising underlying things that were existing there. So I think Black culture is in the place of trying to rediscover itself and rediscover itself in terms of an understanding of self, but then also identifying community, and not community that's your social media following, but actual tangible community that you find in like third spaces, that you find when we're at Vice, where you brought up the idea that we only ever worked on one story, and it never even dawned on me, but we saw each other. Alzo saw me, Antonio saw me, Tracy saw me, and we saw each other. So I think Blackness is always trying to kind of find itself, find a safe space for itself, to like nurture itself and grow and push against what is kind of the systems that we live in, the systems that don't serve us. So kind of finding those spaces in which we can thrive, be happy, vibrant, and colorful. And so I think that's where Black culture always is, because that's, since we came over to this side of the Atlantic, that's what we've had to do to survive and thrive.
Came over to this side of the Atlantic is a very kind way to put it.
Still went over to the side of the Atlantic. Excuse me. Yeah. Yeah.
The issue that I have with some of the definition you laid out about Black culture is that necessarily it's defining us, if I may, us as what we are not. It's defining us against something. You see what I'm saying? Like, what is Black culture? And you brought up things like, not allowing other people to, take things from us. Pushing back against, being oppressed, pushing back against that. And so, now I don't necessarily have a problem with this, because I think in a really large way, look, this is what the Asian American experience is. This is what the experience of a lot of Latino people in the United States is what do I and somebody who just came from Nigeria have in common? Leave all that ADOS stuff alone. Like, I don't even want to touch that, because I'm not all that interested in that right now. But leave that alone. What do I don't know where my ancestors came from necessarily, what part. I don't know where yours came from. What do we have in common? The thing that we have in common, or the headline of the thing that we have in common, is that when the cops show up, we're a Black male and we're treated as such.
Yeah.
And I think we band together because of that. And I also say, for example, what does a kid of Chinese immigrants have in common with a kid of Japanese immigrants? Precisely nothing, except that white America looks at them and says, "Oh, Asian. I'm going to treat you like an Asian person." You dig what I'm saying? And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with reacting to it.
I guess I one thing, or maybe a couple things I push back is, like, where your grandparents are from out there, your ancestors?
My grandparents?
Yeah, where they're from, right?
Yes. I'm personally not that interested in going further back than that, but yeah.
Yes, neither am I. And so I kind of say that to say, like, you have a foundation of like a Black experience, whether it's a Black Caribbean experience, whether it's a Black American experience, and that's a diverse experience where those people had their own things that they enjoyed, things that they liked, that aren't necessarily, yes, in terms of a systematic way, they are defined by kind of the color of their skin, but they are still like vibrant people who like things, who like to play card games, who knew how to make corn liquor, who just maybe didn't have an education because of where they grew up at, but they also like baseball. So I think like you do have that stuff. Like, I feel like we do have that stuff. It just might be a matter of, again, like I brought up the idea of community, like kind of asking your elders and using that, and not feeling like, well, I don't know where I'm from in Africa, so I can't really find anything. I think that's kind of a way that trips you up and doesn't really show you anything. You do have an American, you have a Jamaican, you have a West Guyanese experience, and someone might lump us all together, which is just going to happen. But your experience coming from those various places is still valid and still something.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not. Yeah. I think what I'm backing up into is the idea of Black culture.
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean?
I don't. So it's funny. Like, I remember one of the questions was, how do you define it? I don't know if we necessarily need to.
Like, I agree with that.
I don't know who it serves. Like I feel
Yes.
like it's too vast
Hmm.
to like want to define it, and it's also ever evolving. Like the more we learn about each other and the more we learn about things, like why does that need to be defined to like fit someone's definition? Like the shit just is.
Yeah. It honestly just is, and
And I
that's
think even like
mm,
and even the definition of it is like fucking capitalism, where it's the idea of like, oh, once I can put a name to it, then I can sell it and then I can message it to somebody. And it's like, nah, fuck that. We exist. We are.
yeah, and that is actually, and I want to get to some of the questions that people have asked us. I believe this comes from a fellow black journalist,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted us to talk about the phenomenon of asking black journalists to do big scare quotes here, black stories all month.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's Black History Month. Can you do some black stuff for whatever outlet you happen to be in? And I think that that speaks directly to it, is because, okay, all right, if we get into the trap of defining what black culture is, then there are boundaries drawn around what we are asked to make, and also pushed to do them in February, just like you push to do gay stories in this time. Like, come on, man. But anyway, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So my answer might be a bit interesting. I only ever really cared about doing black stories. Like that was the
This is true. This
like
is Steven.
that was
This is
that was the shit
facts.
I was interested in. So
Yeah.
it was never forced on me because I was doing that in July as well. Like it was
Mm,
never something I was doing in February. I was curious about black people. I was curious about black people from the sense of just discovering blackness. Whether it's we did stories on men's hair weaves, we did stories on strippers who traveled across state lines to get work. Like yeah, that's the shit I was interested in. So it was never forced on me. I think
mm,
that it's funny. Anything that may have been forced on me, it was up to my discretion as like a journalist to be like, well, no, it's a bit more nuanced than this.
yeah.
So it was my job as a journalist to share that nuanced story, to find characters that presented this idea in a more nuanced way that gave it the breadth and life that it deserved. So I never felt like I was forced to do black shit. That's the shit I wanted to do.
Well, I think also, look, I gotta say, I don't want to speak for you,
Uh
but
huh.
I also think that I've been mostly fortunate enough to not have to do that.
Yeah.
Look, nobody advice ever made me do anything like that.
Yes. Same.
And but I do know that there are people who work at places that do make them do stuff like that. Also, look, at Vice, I have had the suggestion of, hey, it's such and such a month. Can we do something? And my response has been, why aren't we doing this all the time? You know what I mean? And so I have had to
Yeah.
say that. I have had to say that about numerous populations. Not certainly I said that at the LA Times. I said that at Vice, and I think it was taken well. But I think, look, a lot of
Uh,
places journalists do get pushed to do that stuff. You know what I mean? And I think it ends up just being mad demeaning. Like I've seen it, and I've felt the pull. I have felt it, which is to say that you only matter
I
in this
I
time.
guess
You
my
know what I
question
mean?
would be yeah, fair, but fair isn't the right word because shit isn't fair. Like life isn't fair. But if like that's your time to shine, knock the shit out the park. Like you tell a diverse, beautiful story about black people because you have that
Mm.
month to do so. And if you feel sidelined, leave or like fight for more. I don't like. I find it. I'm like taken aback by like that would be fine as demeaning because you have to cover black people stuff because you're black.
Not demeaning, just like, oh, now you'll pay attention. But then also, what if you come with something? I think that the fear of some people, and I get this, the fear of some
Mm-hmm.
people is, well, if I come with something that you're not expecting, oh, you're looking for a story of, some poor kid, overcoming the odds and doing whatever, and that fits a particular narrative. But what if there's just some black kid doing some real cool stuff, and I just think,
Yeah.
let's make something about them, and then an editor comes back and says, that's not really what I'm looking for. Can we do something a little more, you know overcoming oppression. How about that? You know what I mean? And I think that's the worry, and I see that, and nobody's ever made me do that because, frankly, if they did, I would leave.
Yeah.
But
So
I've
like I
heard
guess
about
that's
that.
where I'm
Yeah.
at with it, and I'm probably the worst person to ask. But I mean, like the older people who like were my seniors or mentors know me, I'm going to say no, I don't want to
Hmm.
do that, or like that's not the story I kind of want to tell. So I would have left or got in trouble, but I'm cool with that. I can't say
Yeah.
what other people are cool with. So, but I would have pushed back and said something, or yeah, my mouth has gotten me in trouble my entire life. So I'm cool with that.
And
So
this
yeah, that's why I was like, I'm not probably not the best person to answer that.
and this
Yeah.
leads right into the next one with somebody asking about they wanted us to talk about respectability politics and how that informs how black journalists conduct themselves and what topics they go after. I got a feeling I know
That,
what your response is.
yeah. So well, maybe not. Like, you are in a place of business, and you have to conduct yourself according to
Mm,
the mores and norms of that place.
mm,
So if I were to work at the New York Times, I would have to dress way differently than I did working at a Vice or MTV News. Hence, why Stephen Roberts worked at Vice or MTV News.
mm.
Not to say that the New York Times would have had me, but I wasn't necessarily checking for them.
Yeah.
So I think you do have to. We live in a society, so you have to adhere to that stuff. So
Hmm.
those are things you have to adhere to. In terms of like respectability, I don't know. That's on you. Like you kind of have to go with who you are, like how you
Mm.
see yourself, how you tell your stories. I don't know. Yeah, Dexter knows me very well. Like I'm not going to do that. I'm not concerned with making white people feel comfortable. I'm not doing anything to make them feel uncomfortable. I'm not thinking about them. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But yeah, you guys hear
Yeah.
how I talk. But like yeah, yeah,
This is why you're a good person to talk to about this, because I think, look, the world is full of LinkedIn friendly seminars where you get a bunch of people on the stage and talking about, listen, you need to feel empowered, and look, if somebody is, yeah, I had to hide who I was because I'm this, I present this way or whatever at the workplace, that kind of thing. Um, look, not everybody necessarily does that, and I don't want to speak for you, but I could
yeah.
imagine that there probably were some things that might have been easier for you had you done that, but you
Oh
just
yeah,
didn't do
thousand
that.
percent,
And me
a
too.
thousand
Like
percent. Yeah,
I've
yeah,
listened,
yeah, yeah.
once again, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Yeah.
some things that had I changed just ever so slightly, if I would have made just the tiniest concession,
Mm-hmm.
things would have gone much easier for me. Yo, I got banned from from an entire school that I was teaching at when I was substitute teaching because I had a pick in my hair.
Yeah.
The principal had a letter delivered to me saying, do not do this, and I was never allowed to teach at that school again. That was a significant source of income for me. That was my only source of income, and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
it. And that was when I was broke, extra
Same.
broke.
Yeah.
And I've continued to do things like that. And there are places that would not right now would not hire me. They would not let me on camera. It's okay. I'm not checking for them. I don't want to work there, because if that's their
Mm-hmm.
attitude about how I look, I really don't know what they want to say about how I feel.
Exactly. And I
That's
think
already a problem.
yeah, and I
It's a
think I've
litmus
been
test.
super blessed and lucky to work at places like MTV News where
Yeah.
who I was encouraged. I had black people that I could lean on and who guided me, as hard headed as I was, to like advance my career or do the right thing or just learn the systems and different things like
Yeah.
that. But I've been blessed and lucky, and maybe it's a bit of my own like kind of foresight. I wanted to work in places where I could be me. I remember
Mm.
you brought up, I worked at ESPN, which was in Bristol, Connecticut, and that was a huge learning experience for me. And I'm glad I had like really good bosses that helped me navigate that. But I remember I had a boss who used to always get feedback from people about me. And then he would share with me when it was time to do my reviews. And it was always like really, it was kind of funny. But you would get good feedback and then bad feedback. And
Yeah.
then I would point out, I was like, hey, that's the same sentence in the good column as it is in the bad column. It's just someone sees me this way, someone sees me that way. Not that I'm perfect or like I'm not fucking up on something, but in terms of that feedback there that you're listing out, that you called out, these are a different way of saying the same thing. So some people like that I'm the way I am, and some don't.
Yeah.
And I remember him being like, well, maybe if you wore like a suit and tie and different things like that. And then he caught himself. And then later on, when I did my exit interview, he was like, yeah, I knew as soon as I said that you were done. And I was like, yeah, very much so. But like, it wasn't me or for me. And I'm cool with like, if that space is not, or that space, that person, that whatever isn't serving me, I'm out and I'm good with that. And I can sleep. And that's how I was taught to be myself or raised.
Here is where I have to put the sort of disclaimer though, is that we're out here and we're basically saying, and I'm realizing there's gonna be some people who are watching this who were either younger than us and trying to break into where, you know, I don't know where I am, I don't know where you are, but quote unquote where we are, like, you know, that
in our career, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And but then also people who were kind of just from the outside saying, okay, well, all right, well, if they're saying it, then when I hear somebody talking about, you know, once again, respectability politics, essentially, if you don't understand what that is, if it's a new phrase for you, it's essentially, well, it's like you said, it's acting in such a way, changing something about your appearance or your presented personality or how you talk or whatever to make the dominant population more comfortable. Here we're speaking about white, cisgender, heterosexual, generally Christian men in the United States, right? Respectability politics, making yourself more respectable to them. So here you got two dudes talking about, nah, forget that, man. Like we didn't do that. We didn't bend.
So no, I don't. I would say we prefaced this at the beginning where we were like, when you walk into institutions, there are certain like mores and norms that you have to adhere to.
Yeah,
we did say that.
Yeah,
we're not saying completely throw that away.
Yeah,
I was like, when I was an intern, I was the first intern in the office every day. I was delivering everyone's newspaper to their desk. I was staying late to ad lot. Younger people are going to have no idea what that means, but like I was staying late. I was working hard. I was respectful to people. I wasn't being disrespectful. But in terms of who I am, I know how to code switch. Like I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from the project. I have to learn. For my own survival, I have to know how to code switch. And so that's something you have to grab onto. What I'm saying is like being in spaces that don't serve you aren't healthy. So you can code switch all you want, but if you are in a space where the underlying thing is that you're Black, like recognize that and then recognize, all right, how do I want to move and proceed henceforth?
Definitely. And I mean, I bring that up to add to the fact that we are, you know, I will say we are, in a manner of speaking, success stories. You know, not every there's a lot of work that went into it. There's also some luck. Some people don't get that. And so I just want to preface all of that by saying that, or, you know, to add to this all to say that, you know, we're talking as two people who have influenced how culture moves, right? You definitely have influenced how culture moves. Just play the kind of work you've done, B, the places you've been, is not everybody makes it out like that. And it also goes, also another important thing is the volume of work, the volume of actual hustle. Not everybody has that. And I say that in the most neutral and diplomatic sense that possible. And what I mean by that is people shouldn't have to work as hard just to eat. Like the kind of hustle that you had to do to make it where you at, like, you know, work twice as hard to get half as much. Like, you know, that whole thing, like that is not something I would wish on anybody. I would much prefer that everybody doesn't have to put in all of that just to be able to put food on the table. Like that's not a thing that I think is necessary. So just understand what we're talking about. Listen, I did this and I said, you know what, I don't want to be in this environment, so I'm a dip. That comes with so much
consequences.
It comes with consequences, and sometimes those are unforeseen, and sometimes they play out worse for a person. And these are all, you know what I mean? And look, it depending on how you present, depending on how you look, depending on your ethnicity, your religion, all these other things, like people will get hit harder than I would. You know what I mean? Like I
Mm-hmm.
present as, a cisgender straight dude, you know what I mean? Like there's some things that are not going to hit me the way they hit
Yeah.
somebody else. And I don't have to play down parts of my personality the
Mm-hmm.
same way that somebody else does, just so somebody will respect them in a workplace, respect them wherever they at. There's a lot of caveats. This is all just to say that this is how the kind of path that we have taken thus far, I guess. But yeah, man.
Yeah.
But this is what
And like,
this is what the background looks like.
yeah, no, very true. And also, it's like I can only speak from my experience. We all
Mhm.
want to have unique experiences. It's funny. You bring this all up, and let's use Vice as an example without naming
Yeah.
names. But we had younger, blacker people on our team that we mentored, helped do things, helped them guide things. And like I keep bringing up like this idea of like community, like being in the forefront of my mind in terms of what's next. It's
Mm,
like it's continuing like reinforcing that, helping those people do that. Like,
mm,
and that's maybe how you write a pitch. That may be in, okay, cool, don't say anything right now. Let me go talk and ask and see if I can help do something for you. Like,
right.
it's different ways to navigate that. My journey is my journey, and like you can't necessarily take and apply everything I've done to your own. You can kind of
Definitely.
you got to kind of curate how you're going to move, and you also actions have consequences. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, so you kind of got to live with that once you do things. Yeah,
So we talked a little bit about what's taken to be in those rooms that again
yeah.
make these look, we make stuff. You and I, and again,
Mm-hmm.
especially you, make things that will put a, even if slight, dent in the trajectory of what is consumed, what culture is out there. Um, where do you see that going? I mean, you talk about community. You talk about
Mm-hmm.
you said you mentioned a sort of rejection and a potential rejection of just the constant boom, 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 boom stuff. You know what I mean? Like constant just feed of things, which I suppose is something that's possible. Where do you see what's the next phase of? I'll just put it like this. Let's put it in capital terms, in
Yep.
capitalist terms. What's the next phase of cultural consumption or consumption of culture?
So I think I can confidently say I don't care about that part.
Woo. Okay.
Um, I care about the stories that I want to tell. And like I am at the age and like space in my career where I can be selfish and say that. And also like if I may know the answer, I know it's cool. Like I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. But like somebody will pay me to tell them what's cool and like do shit like that. But what
Mm,
I want to do is kind of create a space where again I keep talking about creating spaces and creating shit for ourselves.
mm,
I want to kind of create a space where I can help dictate that and I can
mm,
help illuminate and tell stories that that are start becoming like foundational and validate themselves. I don't know if that quite made sense, but like
yeah.
I think a lot of the work that I've done throughout my career, we could bring in like Vice,
Hmm.
Widen, whatever. They were always stories about just black people being cool with existing, and that's something I want to continue to do, but have ownership of that stuff. Be able to kind of build from that to create a company where most of our friends have Peabodys, fucking I think some of us have Pulitzers, Emmys, all that. A
Hmm.
lot of them out of work and like figuring things out. So I want to be able to create a space, a company, and vision for them to thrive and to be seen, validated, and heard. So that's where I'm at. I'm not interested in like what's cool. I know it's cool. I'm cool. So I'm good on that. I
I,
told you this interview was going to be just heady
no,
and where I was
no,
at with
this
things.
is
Yeah.
good. It's okay. No, this is good, man. Look, all right. Well, related to that,
Uh huh.
there's another question that we got, and you're talking about like community spaces or whatever. Okay, let's talk about having
Yeah.
those spaces invaded. Big
Mm-hmm.
word here, but spaces invaded. Somebody asked, okay, yo, can y'all talk about how gay, black, and brown folk are overlooked by people who quote unquote steal their mannerisms, steal the culture theft, cultural
Yeah.
appropriation. Where are you on cultural appropriation, and how do you think that, not even where are you right now, but like where do you think that goes from here?
So it's we jumped around with a few different things.
Yes.
I think that's unfortunately one of the unfortunate things about being from Black and marginalized communities, like because you are forced to invent your safety and like your own being and like fight and forge those kind of identities, mannerisms, language, shorthands. Those are all for your survival so that you can exist in the society.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, that is never going to kind of go away. But at the same time, there's a beauty and pride that like the our Black and brown brothers in the LGBTQ plus AI community can know that no, you are seen. We see what you're doing. I think that was one of the, while it wasn't like my favorite album, I thought that was a really dope part about what Beyonce did with Renaissance and kind of providing that kind of mirror so that friends from like various queer communities can feel seen and heard and digested. So I think it's continuing to build art, make art, and like that's what I do. I make art. So for me, like that's how I do it. Unfortunately, the way this place was set up is for shit to be exploited. And so I think it's being measured in terms of what you share with an outside community. I think that's something you should be conscious of from all spectrums of Blackness. But like, yeah, I forget if I answered the second half of your question.
Yeah.
But like,
Oh
yeah,
man. Okay. Yeah. But we've talked about this, man. Like being
yeah.
measured what you share with the outside. I don't know that we can do. I don't know that anybody can do that. Again, look at TikTok. Like, are we saying don't put stuff on
I'm not on
TikTok?
TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. Like if I wasn't talking to you, you wouldn't hear the 12 people in here. There might be more on YouTube, but they wouldn't hear like half the stuff that I typically talk to you about. So I don't have a need for like outside people to know the shit I do.
Right.
And again, that's where I'm at in my career, and it's probably a bit of my personality in general. But yeah, I can only speak from my perspective and how I think like gatekeep a bit more, like guard and hold what you do is precious. It's one of the funny things that, but also be vocal about that shit. Call out people when they do things. Recently, the Times ran it, and a few of the like outlets have been like the Travis Kelce haircut, which is basically a fade. And most people know like that's very much influenced by like black hair and just different styles and cuts. One of the cool things that happened was Travis Kelce was like, nah, it's called a fade. It's not the Travis Kelce haircut. And also, y'all not about to get me in trouble during Black History Month. Like he had the knowledge because he grew up around black people, and people have been vocal and fight for who they are, understanding that like our hair is important. The language that I use to communicate with others in my community, so I'm safe, is my own. So I think you continue to be vocal and be like, hey, why are you using that? Like, don't use our slang. Like if people want to obviously like engage in our community, provide them with an education of like, yo, this is what you're about to get, and these are the things you're about to face, and this is who you need to pay homage to, and different things like that. So I think I don't know, I'm just talking now, but like, yeah.
Well, yo, I mean, I think one of the things people got to understand is that appropriation or use of another culture, quote unquote, is pretty built into like American culture in general.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, from the very very beginning. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's genuinely just what that's where this all comes from. I mean, I've used this example before, but let's take it back to the 1800s. Japan was a closed-off country. United States sails over with some boats and says, yo, y'all got to open this place up because we want to do some trade with you. The Americans who were on the ship, first off, they have a bunch of black enslaved men as bodyguards, essentially, but also partially to show, look, we have these people who are much larger than us, if they're doing what we say, that's kind of a signal to you. But afterwards, when they invite the Japanese dignitaries onto the boat and they perform, basically the white dudes put on blackface and essentially did a minstrel show.
Yep.
They did a minstrel show, and that was the first American and Japanese cultural interaction. But that was because at that point there was no American culture other than this. American culture was this sort of repackaged version of what was thought of as black culture. And the Japanese people thought it was incredibly bizarre. They thought it was the weirdest shit they'd ever seen. I mean, and there's records of this, and they drew pictures of it. And you can see in the records, they're just, I don't know what these dudes are doing. They're painting their faces, and they're jumping around. And I think they seem to really enjoy it, so I guess it's funny. But why are they doing this? But that's origin. The origin of American culture is extracting something from somebody else, packaging it, and then saying, okay, yes, this is what we do. This is our pastime. You know what I mean? So that's the origin. So, I mean, the idea of gatekeeping is super interesting to me, but also the idea that, like, I personally think this is kind of going to continue. That's one thing I don't see going away.
Yeah.
Because that was, they were showing off to, again, to repackage it here, they were showing to them that was cool. They were showing off, hey, this is the cool stuff we do. Japan, here's our culture. Here's what we got. I don't see that going away.
You don't think so? So yes, that aspect of it is not going away, but the Michael Jordan having ownership of what Jordan is and how he presents himself in the world is kind of, I think, an evolution of that, where he now, yes, it's in partnership with a company, but he had the foresight to own his image and how he's presented. That's kind of a lesson in which people build from. Beyonce having ownership of her music, and I know I'm using like pop culture and different things like that, but I do think as Black folks have more ownership and in the stories that they tell, the products that they sell, then that allows them to shift that cultural narrative in terms of knowing where that comes from. Building off of the commonalities that they have with their brothers and sisters across both sides of the Atlantic and Pacific, where you can you understand what Afrobeats music is. You understand how grime was influenced by hip hop, but then taken and spun into itself and made something anew. You understand how hip hop from the Bronx can then be taken down to Memphis and then brought into new different things. I think it's like celebrating, uplifting those stories, because yes, cultural appropriation unfortunately will continue, but at the same time, you can celebrate what Black people are doing and share those stories. Share Black stories. Look at that. But yeah,
there you go.
But yeah, like I think yes, like various forms of dance, like Memphis Jukin, like that's its own thing. That's an art form. That's something that can be celebrated in the same vein that you could celebrate ballet. There's no reason why that can't be seen as equals or parallels. The comedy of a Cat Williams, the different things like that. I feel Cat like Williams, there is, yeah, I know that was the first comedian that came to my mind.
No, but, just that interview was wild.
Yeah. But like I understand 1,000%, and I agree with what you're saying in terms of cultural appropriation. But we are thankfully and blessedly not enslaved humans anymore, and we have a lot more agency now, where we kind of build on those lessons and kind of own our shit and like tell our stories.
I do think that what becomes, again, like culture and what becomes consumable culture and what becomes cool in the mainstream often is stuff that gets filtered in from.
Why does anything have to be mainstream? Like, I don't know if we need that cosign of a mainstream. Like,
I don't think we need it.
Exist and thrive outside. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Well, I think, okay, look, because here's the thing is that I think going all the way back to what we were talking about in the beginning, coolness, which again I think is incredibly important. Coolness, often the people who were actually at the forefront were the people who were weird or the people who were at the margins. Sometimes sometimes just by virtue of who they were, but also by virtue of, you know, the things that you get into or whatever, music, the hobbies you have, the interests you have, right? Those things then filter into the mainstream, and then obviously that does affect you in some way. I'm thinking, for example, of what we now term what some people call is like Gen Z slang. You know what I mean? Oh, that's like TikTok slang. That's Gen Z slang. Oh man, no cap on God. Like, no, that's just like black kid slang.
Yeah, it's African American vernacular.
There is
Anyway.
nothing Gen Z about this. There was nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing specifically. There's nothing TikTok about that. The only thing we could say that's TikTok about that is I think there is a sort of, you know, Baltimore slang as a kid would have been completely impenetrable to me. Like I wouldn't have understood it because I'm not from there. Now
Exactly.
I can see it, and I can see what black people in Baltimore are doing, and I can sort of intuit the roots of it, and it feels, oh, that's kind of, I see where that came from, something that like my dad used to say, or that came from something my grandma used to say. Like I can see the roots. It starts to make sense. But that's all to say that there's a lot of stuff that comes out into, again, the mainstream, which we can say we don't care about. Cool. But it does come out into the mainstream as, oh, this is just what cool. This is a cool new thing. And it's like, nah, man, this is just this is a very specific community is saying this, and now that has leaked out, as just as you said, like that's a fade. That's not the guy's haircut. That's a fade. You know what I mean? I think that's continuing.
Yes, but I guess that's going to be what it is. It doesn't make what's happening within that community less valid.
Of course.
Like it doesn't need the validation of
Of course. I'm just saying that I think that is going to be, and I think of this, for example, when I see companies releasing trend forecasts. If for those of y'all who don't know, this is a thing. Is like companies will release trend forecasts, and they'll say, here's what's going to be hot in the next couple of years, in the next 5 years. Like here's the new color that's going to be popular. Cool. And we also have to back up and remember, why are companies releasing these things? Generally it's for advertisers, so advertisers can target us better, make more money off of us, right? But the driving force of this has, again, taking all the way back to the 1850s, it has always been an extraction of a culture that is at the margins, whether that is black culture, whatever you think that means, whether that is queer culture, whatever you think that means, whether that's, you know, that's brown people, whether it's Asian Americans, you know what I mean, whether that's basically anything. And it's going to be a kind of extraction that filters into the mainstream. And then by that point, it's late. Like you're late. And then that's being used to sell you things. Again, capitalism. I didn't make those rules.
Yeah.
I'd like to make different rules, but those are the rules. And I feel like we're seeing that more. We're just seeing it, you know, with something like a TikTok. We're seeing it just diversifying in really interesting ways, but I think the underlying principles are similar. But now you've got people who are able to kind of talk back about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like you brought up the idea of like TikTok slang, but we have the definition that's African American vernacular English.
Yeah.
So one person is wrong, one person is right in that equation. Because there's like evidence. So like, why are you arguing with people who are wrong? Or why do you need the people who are wrong to understand that they're wrong? That's on them. They can read and educate themselves. I don't know. I feel like I'm not being contrarian, but like, it's just kind of how I see it.
No, this is good. No, this is good. I didn't bring you on here to agree with me and back me up and everything I said. This is a conversation.
Because like I totally understand what you're saying. Like, yes, that's true, but there's no reason why you can't celebrate that inward and like because this like inwardly. Because these are
inward. Like,
I know.
Celebrate? We can celebrate that too if you want.
Yeah,
it's Black History Month.
However once, but like. You can like enjoy your experience, your lived experiences, and celebrate them. And like that doesn't mean you have to sell it or that a larger audience has to know what you're talking about. That's cool that they don't know what you're talking about. That to me, like we talk about this idea of coolness. And I think one of the things where you see it almost as a commodification, and I could be wrong. I don't see it as that. I see it as identity. I see it as you establishing like who you are, what you like, and different things like that. And that's its own hub of what it is. It doesn't have to be repackaged or branded so other people can digest it. You knowing who you are is beautiful and cool and should hold you over and sate you. So for me, I'm concerned about elevating that idea and like way of thinking. I understand we live in a capitalist society and that will be somehow manipulated and capitalized upon. That's what it is. But there's no reason why your day-to-day being has to be worrying about that. It should be worrying about your happiness and like your understanding and knowing who you are and finding happiness in like others who celebrate in that.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're talking about two sides of the same phenomenon. You know what I mean? You're
Mm-hmm.
speaking about the inwardness, what Beatmaster saying inner truth, like what
Yeah.
makes you you and being comfortable with what you are, who you are, feeling like you can branch out and learn about things. And I don't think either of us are saying, don't learn about quote unquote other cultures, whatever that means to you. Like nobody will
Yeah.
ever say, I will certainly never say that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even will I say, don't listen to the music, don't, participate, do all of that, man. Because look at me, I've done participated in a whole lot of
Yeah.
things that my 23andMe did not have in plan for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That all being said, you're talking about kind of the inner, your personal thing. I think I'm talking about, okay, let's understand what happens once that gets away from you, because it will, or once that gets away from your insular community, because it will. I'm not saying you need to be preoccupied by it. I'm saying I think it's good to understand what is going to happen after that, because
Fair.
you because you're gonna see quote unquote you're gonna see you out in the wild somewhere, and you're not gonna recognize it, or it's gonna look somewhat familiar, but it's gonna look a little distorted, and it's gonna be used to sell something to somebody. And it's sometimes nice to understand, okay, I see why that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yes.
saying you can
Agree.
stop it, but
Yeah.
yeah, because I think, and I don't want to keep you here too much longer, but there's one thing I think about a lot, man. Is we've talked about MTV, we talked about Vice a little bit. Both places you've been at, one of those that
Yeah.
I've been at. Is I think the arbiter of where cool came from. Again, cool, right? The arbiter of what's hip, what's cool, what's on the forefront, what you need to know. I think at a certain point for a certain generation, it was, American Bandstand. And then you got, in the 70s going on to the early 80s, you got something like Soul Train. Of course, there's magazines in there.
Uh-huh.
Then as Soul Train is starting to kind of decline a little bit, you got MTV with the music videos. Music videos start to become a little bit less important. You can find them online. Then we're talking 2005, 6 or so, Vice comes along.
Yeah.
And Vice is, truly, if you want to know what's hip, Vice had a pulse on a lot of it. I think.
I'll let you finish. I'm gonna let you
Go ahead.
finish.
Yeah. My last thing is that I think we're getting to a point where there is no longer going, like, what is the thing that comes after Vice? I don't think there is anything. I think the thing, just like Pitchfork, what comes after Pitchfork? I don't think there's a post Pitchfork. I think it's people on TikTok.
I feel like you are very much interested in kind of platforms that present culture to places.
Yes, I am.
That's where I no longer care because they're made up.
Mm,
I don't care what they will be, what's next after that, because that's not where I find cool from. It's where I got to learn about some things.
yeah.
But again, like in terms of MTV didn't have black people on the channel for years.
Yes.
Vice didn't. The black people that were on Vice were typically presented from the view of white people for a
Yes.
large number of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, those weren't kind of the end all be alls of what youth culture was. Same way TikTok isn't to me, and that is also as a result of me being older. But like the cool kid is going to shine through no matter what the platform is. Like an LL Cool J is going to be an LL Cool J in the 80s. He's going to find his way in the 90s. He's going to find his way in 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. So like a star is a star. Like no matter what kind of avenue and arena you put them in, they are going to be a star. However, at the core, they are still a star. It's not. It's just like how you are introduced to them as an outside person. So
Mm.
I am, I guess, where I'm at on my own spiritual journey or where I care about in career.
Yeah.
Like none of that shit matters. Like to me, I'm not any of the people at the Grammys. I'm not nearly as talented musically as any of those folks. But like that doesn't mean that SZA didn't have the best album of last year. Like SZA's fucking dope, and like the stories that SZA is
Mm.
sharing from her perspective are beautiful and like a rarely seen or rarely articulated way in which that perspective of like a young black woman navigating relationships, her understanding things like that are important. She doesn't just because she doesn't win a Grammy doesn't mean like that it's less important or
Right.
that Taylor is more valuable than her, or anything like that. She
Mm-hmm.
as a singular force is amazing and beautiful. Like you don't need the cosigns of other things. I'm not gonna say it, but I keep wanting to say you don't need white man paperwork. But like
And you said it.
yeah. But it's like kind of that thing of like you don't need all these like those accolades. Yes, they're external validation, but what does that really hold? And like what control do you have over that? Because that
Yeah.
is such a political game of chess that has there's so many other things that are going on outside of you in terms of jockeying within musical institutions and who might want to be celebrated and highlighted by external forces. That doesn't mean that you are any less valuable because of outside forces, how they might see you, how they might judge you. I think your art is your art, and how you present that, you should have confidence in it, and you should be willing to be critiqued and learn and grow from it.
I think I agree, and I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of these platforms are ceasing to have meaning. What comes after is an interesting question.
I feel like we give things meaning though.
Of course,
Yeah.
people are ceasing to give that meaning, and I think somebody, people like me and you, and frankly, I mean, anybody who grew up on hip hop, anybody who was marginalized or whatever, understands that intuitively. We always knew that the Grammys are, who pays attention to the Grammys.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool when one of us, whatever us means to you, wins. But
Hmm.
it's kind of like a nice to have. It's not a necessary. I mean, you kind of
Yeah.
assume that the real thing at the forefront is not going to win it because it's too far ahead of the curve for it. I mean, I think of, for example, my niece who's now 14, but a few years ago, like she knew what I did for a living
Hmm.
and completely uninterested. And I think somebody said, "Oh yeah, Uncle Dexter's on HBO." Zero interest. At some point, I think we were at some family event, like Super Bowl or something like that, because Super Bowl is a family event. Somebody mentions, "Oh yeah, I saw Dexter's thing on YouTube," and she kind of perks up and says, "You're on YouTube?" And I say, "Yeah." Why? She said, "How many people watch?" And I said, "I don't know. I mean, some of them have a few million views." Loses her mind. Completely
Yeah.
different. Like those brands don't. This is what I'm saying is those brands don't mean anything. So a brand like MTV, a brand like a Vice, don't necessarily mean anything. Now, how do I feel about numbers replacing that? I'm not sure, but the kind of gatekeeper type thing, the kind of platform type thing, it's like you say, a star is a star is a star, and maybe it's to a more niche audience, which I think is also great.
Yeah.
That you could have somebody who's just incredibly meaningful, but not incredibly meaningful for a billion people, incredibly meaningful for 10,000 people or 100,000 people, or just
Yeah.
people in Baltimore or just people in Miami or whatever. I think that's amazing, right? The focus on numbers, the way that it has started to change how people make things, which I do worry a little bit about. I worry about the patience, but I suppose it's something that's inevitable again because of things like TikTok have come, and that is what it is now. But it is becoming interesting.
Yeah. And I think there were always numbers. There was always TV ratings.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Jay Leno didn't get numbers in terms of viewers, he would have been replaced. So there's always been like kind of that metric to qualify or something. However, what I'm kind of, I guess, in a sense, rejecting is like I don't care.
Mm.
Like I care in the sense of I know how I have to play the game.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my stuff for Vice, it got millions of views, and that's why I kept being able to make weird stuff. But I also got be able to make weird and different stuff because it was good. So it's like
Yeah.
a balancing act in a game you have to play. So from that perspective, but I feel like because my foundations aren't let me get views, my foundations are kind of understanding people. That's how I approach coolness. That's how I approach how I look for coolness. That's how I approach telling a story.
Somebody said, thoughts on 4 years later, Biden
Mhm.
telling Charlemagne, if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. Let's bring it all the way back. Let's bring it all the way back. How do
It's
we
funny
feel
because I
about
know who
this?
asked that. I think my laugh summed it up. Yeah. Yep. I think oh man. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be questioning their blackness in the upcoming election cycle.
You remember he did that to Antonia too?
I don't remember he did it to her.
He
He
did.
did at the thing. Yes,
At the Brown and Black Forum. Yeah, he
Yeah.
said almost the exact same thing. I think he said it to her. Not to shout out Antonia Hilton, by the way. Shout out
Right.
Madness. But
New York Times bestseller.
pardon.
Antonia Hilton. Yeah,
Yes.
I would know. We should say New York Times bestseller / Peabody Award winner /
Yes.
Pulitzer finalist.
Yes.
Antonia Hilton. Yeah.
Correct. Sorry.
Mhm.
Got to get the titles in there.
Yeah.
Charlemagne, I believe he said, "You ain't black" to Antonia first.
That's amazing.
Biden said it to Antonia first. Antonia and Alzo.
Yes,
They
at the
both
Black and Brown Forum. Yes, I
Yes.
remember this.
Yes.
Yes, I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen Antonia Hilton or Alzo Slade. They are a spectrum of blackness in of itself. So that should tell you how ridiculous that statement was.
Yeah, that was something, man. Yo, Steven, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
You got the IG down there. You know how to find him. You will see something, I'm sure, popping up on his feed, and he'll tell you about, I don't know, man, the new X-Men that he directed or something like that at some point. Which I feel like that would not be unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
There are a lot of great black characters in X-Men too.
I mean, X-Men's a whole conversation in of itself, but
yeah,
we're not going to get into that. All right, my man. Appreciate you. Talk soon.
Later, y'all.
Easy.